gentlemen, good morning, good morning. How are we all doing on this wonderful, fine, beautiful Sunday morning? I don't know about the weather outside, but in here, it's wonderful, right? There we go. We even got Joey here. We'll shut off our ringer. Okay. Dear friends, here we are. We tried something a little bit new to do to finish off the course with a bit of a bang, because a course like this can't end on a dud. No, a course like this needs to end with a really good big bang. And as Marla has been encouraging me, we can't even let this be the end. We need a follow-up. We need to be doing more. Okay, so we'll get to all these good things. So first of all, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the world of Kabbalah, our grand finale. I think we've earned our way to a really good breakfast here, no? This was not an easy course. Thank you. This was not an easy course to plow our way through. And congratulations to all of us that we are concluding our primer of Kabbalah. And dear friends, we're perhaps at our most important class. At the very end, we're getting to the most important topic. But before I jump in, I want to first share with you that it's actually very, very apropos that today we are celebrating on this very day, which was not on the original schedule, to celebrate the studying of Kabbalah as it is explained by the teachings of Hasidus, by the Rebbes of Chabad, because today, and actually you'll notice, I'm not wearing my regular jacket. I have what's called a kapata or sirtuk, or it's actually called a Prince Charles jacket. This is what conductors wear. Just they have it opened up. But this is a okay. But in the Chabad tradition, this is what we wear on holidays and on Shabbos. And the reason, and I'm wearing it today, because today is actually a very important day of celebration on the Jewish calendar. It is called the New Year of Hasidus. The New Year for the teachings of Hasidus, for the revelation of Hasidus. And I actually want to show you, I want to start today's class with a 5-minute talk from the Rebbe, where he describes a little bit about the day, the significance of this day. But here's a quick cliff notes. The teachings of Kabbalah, and especially to be able to understand it in a way that our minds could approach it as we've been doing in this course, with the tools of the analogies, of the metaphors, which give us an understanding, an approach to all this, is something that if you lived just a few years ago, would not have been possible. We are really on the cutting edge of Jewish study. The greatest scholars, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, for sure 200 years ago, it was impossible to do this. We're living in a certain way in really revolutionary times. How did this happen? Kabbalah was given, as we start off about 6 weeks ago, I started sharing this with you, was given to Moses. And the Jews always knew there's an area of Torah which is called Sod, the secrets, the mystical secrets of the Torah, but it wasn't taught publicly. There actually was a time in temple times when it says that even the youngest children were fluent in the teachings of Kabbalah, but that was a weird time when the Jewish world was at such a high spiritual level. There was peace in Jerusalem, there was peace that spread from Jerusalem throughout the entire world, and it says in the times of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the great sage, even young school children could share with you the teachings of Kabbalah. But for the most part, there was a cap that was placed on the teachings of Kabbalah. And we spoke a lot about this. It can be very, very easily be misunderstood. And by the way, I didn't really speak about this, but I want to speak about it with you today. Maybe we'll talk about it later on. I know that this all of a sudden becomes a very exciting thing. Kabbalah, we're learning Kabbalah, now I understand Kabbalah. And you may want to go on Amazon and start looking for books. There's a lot of pseudo-Kabbalah books. And that's, there you have the risk factor. Unfortunately, people which, it says every single lie has to be built on a little bit of truth. But probably more chances than not, if you're going to go on Amazon and look for a book that says the word Kabbalah on it, is not actually true to the teachings of our tradition. Which is kind of the reason why there had to be a certain layer of gatekeeping or protectiveness over these teachings. So I do actually want to encourage you that I really want you to continue studying it, but I want to make sure that you get it from the right places, the right sources, the right book. So I'll give you recommendations for that. Don't worry about that. But here's the story. Even in the earliest teachings of Kabbalah, even in those times when it was forbidden to teach it publicly, the Talmud speaks about it. A teacher, the times of the Talmud, it says clearly, a teacher is not allowed to teach Kabbalah in an open class like this. Only one-on-one, tops 2 students. Got to be very selective. 2 students, you can make sure the student's understanding it properly. There's no misunderstanding. Teach it to a big class. How could you make sure you're teaching it properly? How can you make sure the student is hearing it properly? But in the earliest text, it says there will be a day when Kabbalah needs to be publicized for all Jews to study. And 500 years ago, the great Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the Arizal, one of the most important teachers of Kabbalah, he wrote, there's going to be a day, there's going to be a time, it's going to be mitzvah legalot zot hachachma. It's going to be a mitzvah to reveal these teachings, this wisdom. But no one knew when that day was. There actually was a prediction in the Zohar, which was written close to 2,000 years ago, that said it's going to be sometime between the year 1740 and 1840. And that was exactly when the holy Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, a very special soul, came on the scene and revealed the teachings, the deepest parts of Torah, which we call today the teachings of Hasidus. Began the Hasidic movement, which are the teachings of Kabbalah in a way that is accessible for Jews, in a way that's approachable for even laymen. And it all started with the Baal Shem Tov, who started the Hasidic movement in about in the very beginning, I believe 1736. Maybe a little bit later. Am I getting the dates right? 1 second. I'm getting basically mid 1700s. He had a student. His name was the Maggid of Mezrich, the second leader of the Hasidic movement. But at that time, even though the Hasidic movement officially began, it was a gradual process. At that time, the mid to late 1700s, most Jews still did not have access to the teachings of Hasidus. The flavor was starting to permeate the ear of European Jewry by osmosis, the inspiration, the fire, the energy. But it wasn't yet something that could be studied. The study of Hasidus was something that began with Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of the Chabad movement, who led the Jewish community in Russia and Ukraine and Poland in the late 1700s. He's the one who wrote the very first book that took these concepts and gave even the most simple Jew, even the most uninitiated Jew, a way to understand these deepest concepts of Torah, the secrets of the Torah, starting with the book of the Tanya, which many of you know about and study with me, and I'll talk. That's a very good continuation from this course to join our weekly Tanya class. We'll talk about that soon. And that is really what started then with the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Schneur Zalman. And from then, all the following Rebbes that followed him continued the art, each generation moving it a step forward, making these teachings even more accessible and more accessible. And if you really see, if you go back at all of these sources that we've been learning about in this course, we've been learning Kabbalah through the teachings of the Hasidic masters, the Chabad Rebbes. Without that, it would be impossible to study these teachings. And actually, if you look at the few texts of actual, authentic, raw Kabbalah themselves are incomprehensible. You need the teachings of Hasidus to give you an entryway, to help you relate to it. In the year 1798, Rabbi Schneur Zalman was framed, actually by fellow Jews. That's a bit of a difficult story. And he was arrested by the Tsarist regime on counts of treason against the Tsarist, against the state. One of his main crimes was sending money to Israel, which was then ruled by the Ottoman Empire, who was at war with the Tsar, and therefore he is collecting funds here to support the enemy. That's treasonous. But in any case, 53 days later he was released, and he shared that this was not just a bump in the road, just unfortunate circumstances. This was deeply symbolic. There was a challenge from on heaven if the continuation of the revelation of Chassidus could continue. Perhaps it's too much. It's too rash, too much going on over here. It's too wild. We got to stop this. It's getting out of hand. And that was why, even physically, he had to be imprisoned. And his release from prison was indicative that on heaven they said that right now the green light is given, that Chassidus can really start going. And from that moment we saw, until then he was much more inhibited. He wasn't teaching as much, not as much in depth, not as long. The floodgates opened. He truly started really, pedal to the metal, sharing the teachings of Chassidus, and we are all benefiting from that. So today is called the New Year for Chassidus because this was the day that, from on heaven, the green light was given, that the Jewish people should be able to access these teachings. It's a day to celebrate it. It's a new year. And I want to share with you a 5-minute talk from the Rebbe about this day. There's no video of this, actually. You'll see there's images. But this is from the 1960s, what the Rebbe shared. So I'm going to play it over here. But here we go. You ready?
Der Gesehre von Josef Kislev le Meiler ist auch wie der alte Rebbe hat erzählt und wie sie gebracht sind von dem Rebbe, dem Schwert, dem Nossi Baruch in Kamos, Sichis und Michtovim. Ist bestanden in der Kitrug le Meiler, vor was mir geht, mit Fasten sein. Seht es Hatera. In a Nefen, als mir soll das verstehen mit Zecho. Bemeile wird das können verstehen, nicht oder die, was sie seien noch nicht treu. Mitzad Ma'amodum und Matzovem in Limo Datero und Kiyima Mitzvahs auf der Griechische in zu lernen in Roseter. Und der alte Rebbe hat das eingestellt in Asamin Seder, wo das die Hisofe auf viel auf dem Masritscher Magid und auf dem Baal Shem Tev, und nicht nur mit soll hören Atero und nehmen an Nikuda allein, aber dem soll ich verstehen mit Avone Vasoge, auch derich, wie man versteht, a Linien in Nigle de Tere, in Gallie de Reise. Und wie der Rebbe der Nossi Mewaihe Baruch in dem Kuntris von Limodach Sidus, das darf sein in a Nefen, und das kann sein in a Nefen, und das muss sein in a Nefen, man soll das verstehen, mit dem Sechel. Was mit Zada Sechel ist auch nicht verbunden, Itzter, ins Mann Hagolos, das mit ihrer Shomayim, wo der Pfarr konnte sein, Asami, was in ihrer Schamayim, derweil fällt ihm noch, und der Afal Piquet soll in Sechel haben, einen tiefen Sechel, und soll können verstehen, dass Sedet Zatero eben mit Gitzares in dem Lewusch von Sechel. Und der Pfarr ist bestanden der Kitrug, man darf reinsetzen, Bekeller, das heißt, auf Menea sein, Chasvischolen, die ist Pashtus. Von dem, was will Nefi sein, Rosen der Reise, in der Nefen von Avone, was Soge bezeichnet. Wie bald hat der Keine gewesen, als noch zu früh Megale sein, Rose Teire in Gas, in der Fahre bestanden der Mensch, also der, was hat das Megale gewesen in Gas, sollen bei ihm zunehmen die Möglichkeit, dass soll können sein in Gas. Und auch der Fall ist der Rheinisch bestanden, Miede Kneget, Miede, Kohlsmaß, ihre Meiler noch nicht gewähnt, durchgebrochen. Als man darf geben, Rose Tere zu allen Jiden, in der Leben von Avone Vasoge, in der Rheinisch ähnlich bestanden in dem, als wie bald man will das Ton kedem als Mann, in der Fall darf man ihm beweisen, als sie können sein, in der Fortschritte. Bishaasle Meilo ist gewollt, hat man gesehen, dass durch den Messias Nefesh von Iden und der alten Reben bereich. I das Gufe beweist, dass sie seinen Roi, wie bald das hat der Messias Nefesh gewähnt, bei Rosh Nisi Israel, wo sie seinen der Chkeler, der Nishmas Kol Bnei Israel, wie Mewaihe Betanie Barucho, ist auch die Messias Nefesh Gufe hat durchgebrochen und bewiesen, als alle Jiden seine Reue und zugegräht hat, bekommen Rose Tere in der Leben von Avone Vasoge. Wo der Pfarrer in Kasche nicht mit Monefschach, ebse früher gewähnt, der Gesehrame darf nicht Nefi sein, verwas hat der noch eine Wattel gewähnt, der Gesehre. Und hat gesagt, man soll ja lernen, Tere bei Avone Vasoge, Nur das, was mod sich meise Nefesh gewährt, nicht gucken die Kassen Kitrugle Meile. Abi bringen Rose Teire zu allen Jiden mit Havone Vasoge, ist Messias Nefesh von Aiden und befragt von Anossi, brecht durch, dass viele den Gzavdinsche Meile wird teichet Nikra und sie wird das Guffe Pflaster durch den Weg, als Rose Teire soll nach Robkommen bei Havone Vasoge zu allen Jiden. Vor man ist ihr das Nefesh von den Jiden, ist die Zeit der Ruhe, was alle Jiden seien der Chakema Schleimer. Der Kol Israel Chaverim, bis sie kommt zu in ein Never von der Chakema Schleimer. Der Goloi Ateis Vischayes, und am ist ihr das Nefesh, peilt das in alle Evrim, als sie werden nicht anders. Und das Gute hat gepeilt bei allen Jiden, als sie seien geworden, nennt zu dem ganzen Linien, Achsidus, wo das ist der Linie von Rosen, die Reise mit Avone Vasol. Was hat das ist die Nekude von Jutes Gisela, dass nicht ein Chaga Gejule mehr nicht für einen bestimmten Kreis, für ein Teil von Jiden, nur das ist ein Chaga Gejule für alle Jiden, der Farwas wie der alte Rebbe ist nicht, als Bishosho, Mati, der Pode, Bisholim, Nafshi, ist ja der, und das hat gebracht, die Gejule, warum hat in der Ruhe besteht, die Gejule, die Bdi, gewähnt in der Nefen von Scholim, und das vereinigen sich alle Jiden zusammen in dem Efen von Nafshi oder Zähne von dem Baal HaGejule, auf bringen Sedes Atere, lechol lechet wie echet mit Israel. Was hat das ist, der Limit für uns diesen dem dort. Aber wir darf wissen sein, als Sieden sein nicht voneinander geteilt auf zwei Gelocken, zu da sehen, was eine Ziel. Und da sehen, was eine Minagdim, dass mehr nicht wie ein Einreden ist und ein Pitui von dem Jeter Hora, was hat mehr, als es werden Schollen begolli bei Israel, wer dämmelt kommen Mashiach, wer es Ruhe Chatum alle min Horet. Hat nicht mehr was zu tun.
Okay, dear friends. So that is the significance of the day. The 19th of Kislev, we're celebrating by actually learning the revelation of these teachings right now, right here. And before we jump in, this is what our next course is going to be. Advice for life, the Lubavitch Rebbe's guidance for leading a more purposeful life. This course is beginning end of January, 6 Wednesdays, same gig, and I think we'll also do last week on a Sunday. You're all forewarned now, and it's a great course. It's a very, very good course. What can I tell you? 6 areas of life. There's going to be a lot of multimedia. We'll see really up close how the Rebbe guided people dealing with real life challenges. There's about family life, business, health, mental health, dealing with adversity and struggling in life, and spiritual growth. Those are the 6 topics. How the Rebbe personally guided individuals. This is not going to be a class about the Rebbe's massive, big ideas, his global work. This is going to be all about how he helped people, individuals just like me and you. So I hope you'll be able to join us starting in January, our winter course. And with all that, without any further ado, let us begin by dedicating today's class. Let us jump in, dedicated in loving memory of Herbert and Sylvia Serlin and Kenneth Andrew Lesser. In their loving memory, thank you, Marshall, for sponsoring. And of course, to also have in mind to dedicate today's class for our brothers and sisters in our holy land, the land of Israel. There should only be peace and security, everlasting peace. And may whatever have to happen, happen. And may Hashem help the IDF to do everything without any loss of life. And God willing, we surely have good news. Dear friends, Lesson 6, titled The Essence of Everything. Let's reorient ourselves. Here we got our Kabbalah mat. And as you'll see, we started our way on the bottom of the Seder Hishtalshalut, the ecosystem of reality. We made our way up. In the first class, we spoke about the lowest realm of reality, our world, including the 3 lowest worlds, which are the worlds of creations, the worlds where there are stuff that sense themselves, the worlds of independence. In lesson 2, we moved up to divine reality, the world of Atzilut, the world of the 10 Sifirot. which become the very building blocks of our reality. This is not a world of creation. This is a world of godly energy, but it is finite energy. It's a finite zone, which is why it is still called a world. A world means that it's something which has its own criteria, its own structure, and that is the world of Atzilut. When you moved on to lesson 3, to the infinite energy of God, which is the infinite light, which is then within the world of Atzilut, made to become finite, confined into the structures. That was lesson 3. Lesson 4, we learned about the world of chaos, how the whole process of turning infinite light into finite light, infinite energy into finite energy, through lights and vessels, imploded. It failed at its first attempt, and the whole inner meaning and secret behind that. What does it mean that something failed? And then we had lesson 5 that spoke about how the Or Ein Sof, the divine infinite light, had to go through contractions and concealments in order for it to create all of reality. And with that, we conclude our map. The only problem is that, where's lesson 6? Lesson 6 is not on the map. Lesson 6 is not on our map. So why is it here? We'll have to see. Lesson 6 is not on the map. What are we going to be talking about today? You know, we spoke so much about all the different elements and parts of creation. Lights and energies and vessels and finite and infinity. Finite godly energy, infinite godly energy, endless godly energy. There's only one thing we still didn't talk about. What's the one topic we still didn't talk about? It's a trick question. The only thing we didn't talk about is God himself. Now, I know we've been talking a lot about God. But when you learn Kabbalah, you have to, everything is with more nuance. Everything we've been learning until now is all learning about godly light. Or in other words, the energy or light that God radiates from himself. Now, that is already something other than God, so to speak. Or, that is what we'll call godliness. But there's something in Kabbalah called God himself. And I want to show that to you. There's godliness, which includes anything and everything that is used within the system of creation. Infinite godly energy, doesn't matter what it is. The moment it's godly light, it is already an emanation. It's an expression of God. That's godliness. Godliness is the expression and creative energy that comes from God. But then there is God himself. And that's what we want to talk about. God, himself, his very own essence. And at the very, very conclusion, as we make our way all the way up the map, and we're learning all about the different processes and the different levels within creation, we got to talk about God himself. And when we talk about God himself, all these terms that we used until now don't work. When we speak about God, there is no name you could use to describe him. When it comes to lights, okay, you could say this name, that name, and I'll explain to you a little bit more. But when we speak about the essence of God, when we speak about God himself, there is nothing you could use to speak of him. There's not even a name. You know, in Judaism, in the Torah, we have lots of different names for God. But there's no name for God himself. It's impossible. You can't even describe God himself. There's no name. So in Kabbalah, we simply use this word. I want to share with you the word. The word is called Atzmut. Atzmut, which means essence. The essence of God. God, he himself. Not the energy that he radiates, because that's already something other. That's something which he's emanating from himself for the purpose of creation. But at the very, very core, God himself. The essence of God from which all else emerges. God himself defies any description. And that's the first thing I want to share with you about God himself. Now, as you could imagine, if there's nothing to say about God, and you can't even call God anything, and you can't describe him as anything, then what are we going to do for the next hour? I don't know. We'll talk about bagels, the Kabbalah of bagels. Why does the bagel need a hole? That's a deep question, no?
Why does a hole need a bagel?
Right. Right. The hole without the bagel. We got to talk about that reality, that phenomenon. What's a hole without a bagel? Okay. So, dear friends, no. Well, we're going to learn about God's essence. And even though right now will perhaps seem as the most abstract topic we're going to be talking about, this topic, speaking about God himself, actually holds the key to everything. In a certain way, you misunderstand all of Kabbalah if you don't reach this level. This is where it all comes down. The secret to everything, the key to everything, lies here. Let's read text 2. We'll start our journey into understanding a little bit, whatever we can, into God. And I'm going to do something interesting. Let's start all the way in the back. Shauna, you got to give us a loud, booming voice. A nice Sunday morning, fresh voice. Text 2, page 178.
Every title is a description, an attempt to describe something about a particular entity. It follows that the recipient of the title is an entity with a degree of definition or limitation that lends itself to description. Now, none of this is true of God's essence, and we are left without any form of name or title by which to refer to him. Our knowledge of Atzmut is limited to the fact that he creates. Consequently, we have no way to refer to Atzmut other than to describe him as creator.
Oh. So if we want to speak about God the way he creates, all right, then we can already speak about all of the descriptions we spoke about. That's speaking about God as creator. But if we want to speak about God himself, it all doesn't work. No description will work. And I'll explain this to you in a moment why. But let's first get the fact down. It is impossible to use any description, no matter how great of a description you'll think it is, to speak about God's essence. So therefore, we don't give it a name, we don't give it a description. At best, simply because we got to use some word. What word do we use? No. Creator's already speaking about the way God already is running within the system. But God himself, beyond creator, will simply use the word atzmut, the essence. The essence of God. Which is a little bit non-descriptive because we're not saying what it is. We're just simply pointing in that direction. And in the Hebrew language, in our prayers, when we are speaking directly to God, we'll use the word atah. Atah, which in Hebrew means you. You. That's very simple. You could say Lord, you could say God, but then sometimes you say atah. Blessed are you. Baruch atah. That atah speaks directly to God. That's what we would mean by that. So that's going to be the first thing I want to share with you today about God. When we speak about atzmut, about the essence of God, no description can capture God at all. And therefore, he's not on the map. Atzmut. You can't even say he. He is already a gender. That's already the way God assumes an identity. Atzmut, the essence of God, beyond anything. You see, when you learn Kabbalah, you could think it's all part of a sequence. You know, we already gave here in this course with this map, we're giving all these coordinates, right? There's latitude, longitude. So we start down here, we make our way up. You could think, okay, here you have Atzmut, number 6, but that's already a massive mistake because you're already putting him within a certain structural system. You're limiting him to the structure, and that is already the first big mistake. It's missing the whole point. The essence of God is not at all on the scale. It's not lower or higher on this scale. This is already a system. This is already a structure. God is he's qualitatively beyond and different and just totally removed from this whole system. You can't put God in any box. You can't say, okay, he's in this level. He's right over here in a larger system. So where is God found within this picture? Everywhere and nowhere. Or maybe let's start the opposite. He's nowhere and everywhere. He's totally infinitely removed. You can't limit him into this box. And I'll explain this to you more in a moment, but I just want to get the basic idea. God is no more up here than he is down here. The essence of God. There's no systems, no structures. He's not bound by anything. Everything is a creation. He's totally beyond the whole thing. And that's the first thing we have to just get that fact down. No description can capture or contain or describe the very essence of God. But at the very essence of God is where everything is. So let's try to understand this a little bit more. What does this mean that God is totally undefined? Why can't he, why doesn't it make sense to say, okay, he's higher than the light that he emanates. He's the next higher level. So let's go a little bit deeper into this. Let's go a little bit further down this road. The basic idea you have to realize is this entire system of creation is a structure. Or, as the very name itself indicates, it's called a seder hishtalshalut. What does a seder mean? Order. There's a system. There's a process here. There's levels and layers and very strong system and structure and order. Meaning there's rules. Things make sense. And everything, so to speak, kind of has a certain pattern and a flow. God is not part of that rule system. God is not bound by that rule system. God doesn't exist in that rule system because he created it. He simply is not bound by these rules. He's not part of this whole structure. He's totally beyond it. The rules itself are also creations. Like, think about this. We know that within our world there are certain rules. Some of them are made up. Like, the business day is 9 to 5. Who said? Who said? All right, we could change that maybe. Okay. Daylight saving times, right? Who said? It has to be daylight saving times. Maybe we should get rid of daylight saving times. Right? So there are rules that you understand are more arbitrary. Then there's rules you can't change. Like 5 is a bigger number than 2. Can't change that. That's just simple logic. What else? Gravity. Huh?
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect. Yesterday's yesterday. Today's today. Tomorrow's tomorrow. Meaning, there's certain things just stuck. This is how things work. Infinity is infinity, and finite is right. These are things which are just all of a sudden logical. What you have to realize is those rules themselves are creations. God made up those rules. So it's a little bit philosophical, but the first thing I want to share with you is you can't call God himself infinite. Until now, this whole course was talking about finite, infinite, right? The whole thing was finite, infinite. Like I once saw a line, I love infinity, I could talk about it a whole day. All right, a little bit cheesy, Okay. Right? Okay. But you can't even call God an infinite. Why not? You would think God is for sure infinite. If God's light is infinite, then for sure God is infinite. But I've got news for you. Thinking about God as being infinite is itself a flawed conception of God. You're already describing a created definition onto God. What are you saying? First of all, you're limiting it to something. You're saying it's infinite, it's not finite. But also, you are using a certain system of description and definition to say that, okay, we could sometimes use the terms infinity and infinite, and we're going to use the term infinity to describe God. You can't do that. God created the very concept of infinity. God is beyond infinity. The same thing. You can't say, I just figured out a great math problem, it tasted so good. Why can't you say that? Because it's a different realm, right? So whenever you use a description, you have to use words of description that describe something, it has to fit into the realm of that description. So things you could touch, you could describe it with different terms of touch. Things you could understand. God created all these realities. God even created finite and infinity. You can't even call God infinite. And God is not bound at all by the description of infinity. He stands totally beyond it. So he's not even infinite. He's not higher or lower. If you put him higher, you missed the whole point. So once again, where is God? Where is God's essence? On the map? Nowhere. And at the same time, everywhere. It's the true essence. Let's read text 3. Richard, page 184.
In truth, even infinity does not express us, but rather God's essence is neither finite nor infinite.
When it comes to divine revelation, which is already within a system, there's infinity, there's finite, there's limitations of each one, there's processes they need to go through in order for things to work out. God is not, God's essence, atzmut, is not limited by limitlessness. Right? Doesn't happen. To God, infinity is as equal as something which is finite. Some finitude is not a limitation for God's essence. All these things are made up rules. He made them up. We live within these rules, so they're very real to us. And the logic of them makes sense, right? 100 is more than 1. No way to get around that fact. We're stuck within that system. God created that system. So here's the key idea. When you look at the map, which is a seder, it's an order, there's a structure. This is the lowest. This is the highest. There's a reason why this is higher, this is lower. One's more limited, one's more constricted, one's less energy. But once you get to atzmut, once you get to God's essence, this is no more of a problem than this. God is equally found here as in here. God's essence is not bound by the system. No symptom. Remember we spoke about symptom last week? Contractions, limitations. These processes to diminish God's energy, to let it go down and create a lower form of reality. None of these systems are applied to God. God's essence doesn't need a symptom in order to be found in the lower worlds. God's essence is not on the map, it's nowhere, and it's everywhere. And this is this idea. It's undefined. No description can contain atzmut, and God is really beyond infinity. And this is the second point, which is really the continuation. God defies all the rules. None of the rules apply. Atzmut is the source of the rules, and is totally beyond those rules. And then we added, He's even beyond, or it's even beyond. God's essence is even beyond the definition of infinity. Okay, this is still very philosophical. We'll bring it back down soon in a moment. Let's first get the philosophy done, right? This concept of God being totally infinite, what am I saying? Being totally beyond infinity, beyond description, nowhere and everywhere, the very essence of everything, is a concept which is used in Kabbalah, described as this. Look at page 185. 185 is called Nimna HaNimnaot, the impossibility of the impossible, which is the concept, it's impossible to ascribe an impossibility to Atzmut, which means there's infinity, there's finite. Neither of these are limitations for God. They could go together by God, no problems at all. The whole concept of rules and structure doesn't apply. Now, what's an example of this? It's a very deep concept. What does that mean? An example of where this was in the Holy Temple. When God gave the Jews the Torah at Mount Sinai, He right away told the Jewish people, I want to have a home with you. I want to have a home. Build me a tabernacle, which became the home of God that rested amongst the Jewish people. It was first in the traveling tabernacle that traveled with the Jews in the desert. And then it was in the Holy Temple, which was in Jerusalem. And at the very, very epicenter of the Holy Temple, you had a room that was called the Holy of Holies. And the Holy of Holies was where God's essence was there. So you have a physical space on earth. It's a room. It had a measurement. And it wasn't a revelation of God. God Himself was present in that room. Now, what does that even mean? No one was allowed to go in that room. It's considered a very holy space, of course, a sacred space. The high priest, the Kohen Gadol, was only allowed to go in there on Yom Kippur. And if he wasn't a proper fit for the office of high priest, you know what would happen? He would not emerge from there alive. Every single high priest would go in there with a rope attached to his waist, so that they could pull him out if it was needed. This was going into a space that's beyond reality. In that space was the Holy Ark. Now here's the interesting thing. The Holy Ark, as described in the Torah, had an exact measurement. It was 2.5 cubits long. 2.5 by 1.5. That was its length and width. Okay, 2.5. The room of the Holy Temple, of the Holy of Holies in the Holy Temple, was 20 by 20. Now let's do a little bit of math over here. If you have this in the middle of a 20, in a 20, let's just use feet just to make it a little bit easier right now, all right? 20-foot long room and 2.5 feet object. If you're going to measure from the edge of this object to the end of the room, how much do you have? What's 2.5 split by 2? Someone help me out over here.
1.25.
Right, so 1.125. What was that?
8 3/4.
8 3/4. So how much do you got over here? How many feet?
8
8 3/4. Oh, very good. 8 3/4, 8.75, and 8.75. So you have 2.5 over here, and then 8.75, 8.75. Here's the interesting thing. If you would go into the Holy of Holies, and you would start measuring the room, the Talmud discusses this. I guess somebody once did this. What would happen is, you'd measure the whole room, you get 20 cubits. You would measure the ark, 2.5 cubits. But if you will measure the space on the side of the cubits, you got 10. This side, also 10. Altogether, that's 22.5. But you measure the whole thing, it's only 20. It was a room which was both within finite reality, but at the same time existed where all of these rules don't exist. That was the idea that the essence of God was expressed there. It wasn't a room of infinity. No, it was a room of measurements. It was very much entrenched in our physical world. The Talmud discusses this. There were laws of logic there. It did measure, but at the same time, the measurements never added up. It was both at the same time. It wasn't just infinite. It was infinity with infinity. Right? It was the infinity within a finite reality. And this is the idea that when it comes to God, there are no rules. When it comes to God's essence, in Atzmut, there's no rules of reality, no structure, no definition. Every definition is already within a certain conceived environment of reality, which is the world that we live in. There's all different forms of structures. There's the structures of logic, there's the structures of physics, there's the structures of everything. That's the world we live within. There's even the structures of spiritual reality. God is totally beyond that. He's no more closer related to infinity than he's related to finite. They're both he's beyond that. He's totally beyond any of those realities. To him, both are the same. Finite, infinite. Neither of them are any more or less of a challenge for him to be present there. And he is, or it, Atzmut, is equally present in both. Okay. Let's take this a step further. And here's where we're going to start seeing how this idea starts bringing it closer to home. And today's class, I want to share with you two very practical ideas from learning about Atzmut, about God's essence. One is going to be a personal one, and one is going to be to get down to what is the purpose of reality. Why are we here? Why did God decide to get the whole world spinning? Why did God make this whole system? For what? For when? That we can only understand by going to Atzmut. But let's start bringing it down a little bit personal. Let's keep on going down this road. God is beyond description. God cannot be defined and therefore cannot be limited. God cannot be limited by any rules, even the rules or the structures of infinity and finitude. There's also another set of rules which Atzmut lies beyond. And those are the rules of morality. Even right and wrong, holy and unholy. That is a structure that God created within our world. Things could be right, things could be wrong. Things could be moral, things could be immoral. Things could be holy, things could be the antithesis of holiness. Is God bound by that? Is God himself moral? Here we have, this is a conundrum over here. Let's read this text. All right, we're starting to apply some pressure here. Okay, Let's read text 4. This is a mind-boggling midrash. How do you make sense of this midrash? A teaching of the sages. Text 4, page 186. Debbie, give us a good shout.
From the start of the universe's creation.
4, text 4.
Am I in the right?
Yes, I'm sorry.
From the start of the universe's creation, God foresaw the deeds of the righteous and the deeds of the wicked, as it is stated. God knows the way of the righteous and the way of the wicked that is doomed. This was represented at the start of creation as follows. The earth was chaotic and desolate. This refers to the deeds of the wicked. God said, "Let there be light." This refers to the deeds of the righteous. However, the narrative is yet to clarify the genre of deeds that God desires. Is it these or those? This is clarified in the following verse. God saw that the light was good. Clearly, God desires the deeds of the righteous and does not desire the deeds of the wicked.
What does this mean? So God creates wickedness, evil, impurity, unholiness. God then creates righteousness and goodness and holiness. And we don't know which one God wants. Oh, God chooses goodness. All right, phew. All right, thank God. Well, what does that even mean? God is not sure he's going to choose. God could choose to desire the deeds of the wicked? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. God created these realities from scratch. We live in a world, we're already within this environment that there's goodness and wickedness. We're already bound by these realities. God wasn't. God created that. And then God chose which one is he going to desire. He chose what to create, including goodness and wickedness. And then he chose which one he will create to be desirable. And he chose goodness. And by the way, that's why we feel deep inside our hearts an inner morality, a love for righteousness. Why? Because God decided that. But when we choose righteousness and goodness and holiness, we don't have a free choice. We're already being persuaded by the realities within the world. God had that absolute choice. God starts with a totally blank piece of paper. What is he going to choose to make as the world? There's no external considerations. For example, what does free choice mean? Free choice means it's literally an equal choice. There's no difference between them. So for example, if I give you an option, would you like $10 or $100? Is that a free choice? On the one hand, yeah, what do you mean? I'm not telling you what to do, you get to choose. But on the other hand, it's not really a free choice. Why? Because the answer is obvious. It's not a free choice. 100 is more value than 10. So you're already being compelled to choose 100 over 10. That's not called free choice. Right? Would you like a bagel breakfast? Or would you like, I don't know, some carb-free, sugar-free, fat-free, just ice. Just ice. You can't go wrong with ice. It's a free choice, but come on. That's not called free choice. See, there's two types of free. There's free choice. One thing is that no one is compelling you. But then there's another idea. Is reason compelling you? Is reality compelling you? We don't have real free choice. God has real free choice. God decided to choose that he wants goodness. And God decided that he wants us to do goodness. This was something that God was able to choose totally freely by deciding what reality will be and then what should be desired. So that concept that God can make a totally free choice, starting with zero considerations, zero realities on the ground that compel you to choose one over the other, that is the exclusive domain of what we'll call atzmut. So God chose to care about us. God doesn't need to care about us. God chose to care about us. And God chose to embrace goodness. And God chose to care that we should do good. But it's not that God has to be moral, because morality is good, so too bad on God. He got to be moral. It's the opposite. He's creating morality. He gets to choose if he wants morality. And that was God's choice. He decides to choose reality Because he chose reality, therefore we could relate to that choice as well. Some of God's choices we can understand, right? Oh, God chose morality? Good for me. You know, we're on the same page. God made some choices that we don't get to understand at all. And we have to appreciate that. God is totally beyond any pre-existing realities that can make one choice more compelling than the other. God gifted us that with some of his choices, we could appreciate them. Why and how? Some of his choices we just don't understand at all. But we have to appreciate this concept. God is beyond the choice. Okay, this is very, very fascinating. But how is this relevant? What's the point of all this? How does it relate to us? Why should I care? Here's the big idea. Let's put this up over here. God has absolute free choice, right? He defies the rules. Right, let's go through this again. God's essence defies the rules. It's the source of the rules and is beyond them, even beyond the definition of infinity, and therefore he has absolute free choice. This explains a vanishing phenomenon. Let's read text 5. And this is where it gets personal. A very deep idea in Kabbalah explains something which otherwise is really very difficult to understand in Judaism. Text 5, page 188 from Maimonides. Daniel, give us a read.
Absolute power of repentance. Nothing stands in the way of teshuvah, even if one denied God's existence throughout their life and then repented in their final moments. They merit a portion of in the world to come.
There's a rule in Judaism. Nothing stands in the way of repentance. And everybody wonders, nothing? Really nothing? Is it impossible for a Jew to do something that is so bad that maybe we'll say, I'm sorry, there's no way to redeem such a disgusting, evil, treacherous soul? And Judaism comes and says, no Jew is ever too lost. And the question is, of course, how's that possible? How would you explain that logic? How does that work? Imagine somebody does the very worst thing imaginable. He could do teshuvah? And the answer is, and this is an idea that Kabbalah speaks about, Chassidus speaks about, all the mitzvahs do something within the system. There's cause and effect. Every mitzvah has its effect that it accomplishes. Teshuvah touches God's essence. The mitzvah of teshuvah touches God's essence. Atzmut, where God is beyond the rules. Let's read this next text. Richard, text 6, page 189.
The ultimate boss. Violations of the divine will are felt most keenly by the divine author who scripted that will. On the other hand, God transcends his own will and is not compelled to react to violations in a particular way, for who can tell him, what are you doing? Consequently, through teshuvah, which is loftier than all of the mitzvot, and which touches the innermost depth of God's desire, one can obtain atonement.
According to the system, according to the rule book, it makes perfect sense that somebody is too far gone. It makes sense that you've caused too much damage to the world, to your own soul. You've scarred your own soul too deeply. You are too far gone.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I don't understand when you talk about we don't have free choice. I understand what you're saying, but if I come to a door and I want to go through, there's a left door and a right door. Don't I make the decision which door, and nothing is influencing
That's true.
me?
That's true. Yeah. If the only time when there's a real choice is when there's no pro or con in one over the other.
So we have free choice to some degree.
That's right. But the one who has real free choice is God. He has real free choice in everything, in every decision. Yeah. Okay. But let's get back to this. This is a very deep idea. God is totally, one second. God is totally beyond the whole system. According to the system, it's conceivable. You're too far gone. God gave us in the Torah something called teshuvah, which means that if you only show God that you really, truly want to go back, no matter how bad it was, God will give you the gift of hacking the whole system. He doesn't even have to hack the whole system. He made up the whole system. He can even go back in time, Chassidus teaches, and change the damage, whatever that means. That he'll revoke what happened in the past. He gave us the power to even reach beyond the system. And if a Jew truly wants, there's nothing that stands in the way of teshuvah. Nothing. Why is that? The reason is because just as there is the essence of God, a little bit of that essence of God is within our own souls. The very core of our soul has some of this essence of God. Let's speak a little bit about our souls. In Jewish texts, it speaks about 5 levels of the soul. There's nefesh. It's possible some of you are familiar with these terms. Possibly not. That's okay. Don't worry. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechida. It's like layers of an onion. And it actually parallels the levels of the soul that we've spoken about over here. Nefesh is biological functionality. Ruach are the emotional faculties. Neshama are the intellectual faculties. Chaya is the desire of the soul, the infinity of the soul. But then you have Yechida. Yechida is that point, the essence of the soul, which just as God's essence is indescribable and is found everywhere and nowhere. It's linked with God's essence. It is God's essence found within you. And because of this Yechida, the very, very inner point of your soul, which is linked to God's essence, there's a possibility for teshuvah. That nothing stands in the way of you yourself going totally beyond the whole system. And this is what's called, perhaps you've heard the Yiddish, the Pintele Yid, the very point of the Jewish soul, the spark that can never get tampered. Kabbalah says at the 5 layers of the soul, you could cause damage. Damage is caused when we do something that's wrong. But you could never damage that pilot light, the spark, the yechida. Yechida means oneness, the very truth and essence of the soul. Let's read text 7. Max. Text 7, page 191.
Sense of bond. Together the Jewish people and God form one complete entity, so to speak. This is due to the bond between the very essence of the soul and God's essence. By contrast, while the soul's various expressions and powers also enjoy a relationship with God, the relationship is susceptible to damage as a consequence of the person's choices. The soul's essence is always intimately bound and united with God in a unity that our sages depict as merged and bonded with you in a oneness to be one with you.
The soul, the very essence of the soul, is one with God. At the very essence of the soul, we also truly live beyond the system. Souls are really created or exist beyond reality. Reality was created to be a stage upon which the soul could live with him. But the soul itself, the yechida, the essence of the soul is beyond reality. Could you damage your soul? You could damage the way your soul enters to be a creation within the system. And Kabbalah speaks about this, something called a pagam. You could really damage, and just like anything within creation, you could hurt your own soul. By bad choices, you scar your own soul. And it takes a lot of rehabilitation to fix that damage. And sometimes, maybe even conceivable, you could hurt your own soul so badly. Damage is too deep. But the Jewish soul and God totally live beyond the system. And if a Jew truly desires and reaches that deep place, teshuvah changes it. It touches the deep essence. There's a story, unbelievable story. It was shared by a Jewish diplomat and an activist. His name was Israel Singer. I think he's still alive, maybe. Old man by now, right? Israel Singer. He was involved with the World Jewish Congress. He was like one of the leaders there. In the 1980s, he was a very high position in the World Jewish Congress. He visited Russia, the former Soviet Union, and he reported back to the Rebbe after his visit. He wasn't religious, he wasn't Chabad, but the Rebbe was very, very involved, especially with the underground in former Soviet Union. And he reported back, and he told the Rebbe something very, very interesting. He said when he was there in Russia, doing whatever work he was doing there, a local journalist told him that he could help him meet a Jew by the name of Lazar Kaganovich, which perhaps some of you know the name. You know the name, Max?
Yes.
He was a very high-level officer under Stalin, of course, a good Jewish boy, and he was a top diplomat under Stalin, a member of the what's it called, Politburo, Politburo, whatever it's called, right? A Politburo, okay. All right. It's okay. Send it into. All right.
Staten Island.
Okay, got it. The borough. Okay, the borough. The borough of Polit. Okay. And he was not a good guy. He was not a good guy. He was Stalin's right-hand man, which already spells a lot of trouble. But the history books say that directly under his watch, under his administrative work, millions of people died. He starved millions of people. He was ousted, like every communist leader. He was ousted out of the party in 1946, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was 56. 56 after Stalin died. And no one even knew if he was alive. He's an old man already, and this Jew, Israel Singer, meets him in his apartment. And he tells the Rebbe, I met this guy. And he says, the Rebbe was shocked. He said, wow, he's still alive. And the Rebbe said, he must be an Alta Yid. He must be a very old Jew by now. And the Rebbe asks Israel Singer, Mr. Singer, he says, next time you go to Russia, can you please speak to him about doing teshuvah? Please speak with him. This is a Jew who has thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of Jewish lives, the blood of hundreds of thousands of Jews on his hand, and millions and millions of Russians on his hand. And the Rebbe says he's old, he's out of it already. Tell him he could do teshuvah. Now, how crazy is that story? Now, the Rebbe was not somebody who was indifferent to Stalin's purges. The Rebbe's father was killed under Stalin. The Rebbe's whole family suffered. The Rebbe himself suffered. It wasn't like the Rebbe was coming in and being a little bit ahistorical, like, yeah, it's okay, let's come back 100 years later and let people have a second chance. The Rebbe knew good and well just how much trouble it was. But he's a Jew. There's a spark. Even if it's so hard to find, there's that pintel yid. Teshuvah is always possible. A Jew is never too far gone. And the secret of it is in understanding atzmut, because the relationship that you have with God, the core of your soul, is totally beyond the whole rule book. So dear friends, let's do a little bit of a video right now. We'll summarize what we learned about, and then we'll get to the main punchline of today's class. So here we go. This is what's called the Yechidah, the essence of the soul, that is inexorably united with God, is one with God on that level. And this is the idea we just said, that Atzmut is connected to the deepest part of our souls, the Yechidah, allowing us to tap into God's essence. And dear friends, here we go.
Welcome to our final episode on the world of Kabbalah. The mystical system stretches like a ladder. In our first episode, we began at its lowest rung and we climbed upward from there. So, before we hit the climax, let's recap our previous steps. Lesson 1. We met the 3 basic layers of God's creation that range from terra firma to the spiritual extreme. Kabbalists call them 3 worlds of created entities: Asiya, Yetzirah, and Beriah. What do they have in common? They sense their own identity, and they feel independent from God. We can relate to that all too well. Lesson 2. We rose beyond creation to meet the divine world of Atzilut, home to the Sefirot. The divinity of Atzilut is stamped with the limitations of defined characteristics. We cannot relate to such powerful divinity, but we can connect with its variety of characteristics. Lesson 3. We soared beyond Atzilut to meet Keter. That's a leap from divinity with limitations to God's infinite light. It's difficult for us to relate to God's infinity, but we learned why the infinite light is indispensable for our limited world. Lesson 4. We hit the peak of our ladder and discovered a debris field of a cosmic mystical explosion. During the pre-birth of creation, the intense but chaotic spiritual layer known as Tohu imploded, the effects of which still impact our reality today. Lesson 5. We met the ultimate mystery of creation. How does anything but infinity emerge from God's infinite light? That's where we discovered Tzimtzum, the cosmic process of contracting and concealing divine light to facilitate the emergence of all layers of existence. That was some ride. So, what's missing? Well, we've discussed God's creation, its system, purpose, and relevance. We've also discussed God's transcendent divinity. But we haven't discussed God Himself. There's a reason for that. God is off the charts. We plotted a path from the foot of the mystical system, that's us, all the way to the greatest divine revelation. But God's self, or Atzmut, the essence, that's beyond any revelation, description, or definition. God transcends all logic and rules, which are merely His own creations. So here's today's surprise. That's exactly what makes God Himself most relevant. Why is that? Here's one reason. God designed us in His own image, which means that He gave us the ability, not provided to the rest of the rule-abiding system, to break the divine rules. And we do. We mess up. But where do we go from there? The system works by the book. We threw out the book, so the system won't let us back in. Thankfully, God Himself, at His essence, is not bound by the rules He authored. He is free to revise or override at will. And God chose to connect our deepest core, the very essence of our soul, to His own essence. How does that help us? Because our desire to repair our relationship with God after messing up springs from our deepest self. It's the voice of our innermost soul. So when we reach into our deepest self to return to God's embrace, God does the same. He overrides His own system to provide us clemency and atonement. Our sincerity cuts through the cosmos, and God's reciprocating love cuts through His infinite light, the Tzimtzum, Tohu, Keter, Atzilut, Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya, to us. Now, if that's not absolutely relevant, nothing is.
How was that? Good video? Yeah. Nice, good recap? Very good, okay. Dear friends, we're running out of time. Not running out of time, but time's getting late. We got a big Sunday still ahead of us. Let's wrap up with the most important point of this whole course. And now that we've explored everything, the whole system, and God's essence, which is beyond the system, we can come to the question that is perhaps most at the heart of Kabbalah, and maybe is what attracts most people to Kabbalah, is the why. What's the purpose? What is the meaning? What is the purpose behind everything? Why did God get everything going? Why are we here? What's life all about? Why? Just, you learn all this stuff. Why are we learning about it? Why did God make all this stuff? What's it for? The answer is only in understanding God's essence, which is the irony, right? the one subject of Kabbalah which is most hands-off, defies any description, is actually what's most relevant. Is what's most relevant to all of us. Let's read a text. You ready for this? This text is from the oldest book of Kabbalah and the most cryptic one. It's called Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation. You know who wrote the Book of Formation? Abraham. Our tradition tells us that these are the teachings of our father Abraham. Avraham Avinu. Text 12. Let's go to you. Lee, we're by you. Text 12, page 199.
The end is wedged in the beginning, and the beginning in the end.
Once you hit the beginning, you come back to the end. The end is wedged in the beginning in the end. And this concept is actually alluded to in the prayer we say every single Friday night, the Lichadodi prayer, which is a Kabbalistic prayer, the Lichadodi song. And in there's a line that says, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila. The end of all action was in the beginning of the thought. The very end is really where it all starts. So when you get to the very top and beyond the chart, you come back right here to our world. And it's actually logical. Every single system, if you always ask, why is there this system in place? The answer is always going to be, well, what's the last step? What's it building up towards? So if you want to build a house, we gave this analogy before, right? Building a house, there's all these steps that go into it. First, there's simply the desire to build a new house. And then you have to go and start actualizing that desire, start meeting with contractors and designers and figuring out what you really want. And you're doing all this long processes and investments. But you're not doing it, right? We spoke about this. You're not doing it because you want to have a meeting with a plumber. Right? I just had a plumber in my house. He had a leak. Right? No one likes plumbers. Meaning, on a personal level, they're great guys, but they charge a lot. It's never fun. Okay. It's always for the end game. What do we get out of this? And what is at the end is our world. Says Kabbalah, and this becomes a cornerstone of the understanding of spiritual living, spiritual teachings, that the purpose is not in all spiritual realities. The purpose is down here. The end is wedged in the beginning is wedged in the end. What does God really want? Before he created any systems, before making infinite lights, before making worlds, what does he want? Our world only. And Kabbalah actually says, and I want to share this with you quickly, you'll actually see that some of the characteristics of God's essence are only found in our world. Free choice. So this is interesting. Joel asked about this. Interesting he asked about this. God, we said, has the ultimate free choice. And nothing else in creation has free choice. Animals don't have free choice. The sun and the stars don't have free choice. Angels don't have free choice. Angels are called animals. They're spiritual animals. They're created to do something. They do it. They're robots. Predictable. Never go off course. The only space where there's some resemblance of free choice is where? Is our world. So too, the idea of not having an origin, not sensing your source. In every single spiritual level, they sense their source. They sense the light of God. The only place where you don't sense a beginning is our world. Just like God. It's interesting. Our world shares the most characteristics with God's essence. Which Kabbalah says, look, that's because God is most deeply invested in our lowest form of reality. And the irony is it's so distant from God, but that's what God really wanted. Why does God want our world? For what purpose? What could our world give to God? Dear friends, now that we've learned our whole course, and all these topics, I want to read with you text 13. It's a long text, I want to read it, and I need to explain it to you. It's a very deep text, but as you'll see, Everything we've learned in this course, you'll see in this text. So we'll take it nice and slow. But this gives us the secret to what God wants. And the text is titled, A Home for Atzmut. God wanted a home. Page 200, let's read. Text 13, this is from the Tanya, chapter 36. Okay. There is a known statement of our sages, it's a midrash, that God created this world to enable the fulfillment of his desire for an abode in this lowest realm. God wanted a home in the lowest world. Why God wants that? I don't know. I'm not God. I'm nowhere near God, right? God's essence, you can't even describe it. But this much we know. That's simply what God wants. This and nothing else. The lowest world, a place where there's no God, no godliness, no awareness of God. And that essence should be invited to be at home here. Let's continue reading. Okay, here we have the Kabbalah. Now, there is no higher and lower in God's presence because he fills every realm of existence equally, right? Where is Atzmut more or less? No, God's essence is everywhere. You can't say it's higher or lower. So you can't say there's higher and lower, or there's a place where God is not already there. Is God here? Of course God's here. God's essence is here. Rather, says the Tanya, the description of our world as the lowest realm can be understood by first appreciating that before the creation of the universe, all that existed was God himself. Before reality, there's only God. The very space that the universe now occupies was entirely filled with God's presence. In fact, that remains the reality even now, from the truth of God's perspective. Nothing changed. God's essence is still here. The change caused by creation is only in the perspective of the recipients of God's vivifying energy. Only from our perspective does it seem that God is not here. Why? Because they receive this energy by way of multiple screens that dim and conceal God's light from their perspective, which we spoke about last week, called Tzimtzum, right? That Tzimtzum causes that we don't see God and sense God. The concealing process is referred to as the hishtalshalut of the worlds, meaning their devolution from each other via interlinked, progressively dimmer realities by way of countless steps of concealment of the divine light and energy. This continues all the way until the creation of this physical, corporeal, tangible world of ours, the bottom of the entire chain, right down here. The lowest form of total darkness from God. There is no lower realm in terms of the concealment of God's light. God becomes totally blacked out from our perspective in this lowest world. It is a world of incredible darkness, to the extent that it is filled with klipot, unholiness, that oppose God in actuality and claim that nothing exists beyond their immediate reality. Okay, how's that for a little bit of a Kabbalistic overview, right? God's essence is everywhere, but God creates this whole world, progressively dimming and hiding his energy, his light, his presence, until I get to this lowest world, the darkest reality in terms of not sensing God. But here we go. The goal of the entire chain of interlinked realms of spiritual existence and the purpose of their progressively steeper descents in terms of divine concealment is not for any of those spiritual worlds. The purpose is not spiritual worlds. God didn't make this like that he could have holy angels, holy souls. Rather, the purpose is to arrive at this lowly, tangible world. For it was God's original desire to derive pleasure from mortal efforts, from human efforts, to suppress the forces of evil and to transform the darkness into light. Until God's infinite light shines openly through the entirety of this world, the very habitat of ultimate darkness and the forces that oppose sanctity. Dear friends, God didn't make the world for perfect angels. God didn't create the world for paradises. God created the world simply for us and our environment. And when you feel, and maybe you feel even like disconnected, oh, I don't care about God. Oh, that's the point. That's the whole point. To be a space, a habitat, where there are humans, where there are Jews, where there are souls, but they are totally disconnected from God. They have real free choice. And what could they then do? Invite God to be at home in that space. And this is called, dear friends, I'm going to tell you the term for this in a moment. Atzmut's desire is to be revealed in our world through the human effort of doing mitzvot. And this is called, in Hebrew, Dira B'tachtonim, a home in the lowly. God's desire to have a home in this world fashioned by our doing mitzvot. What's a mitzvah? A mitzvah is something that God gave us, a commandment, which either makes sense or doesn't make sense. But by the way, more often than not, it does not make sense. There are three types of mitzvahs. There are mitzvahs that make a lot of sense, like do not murder. There are mitzvahs that make quasi-sense, like a Passover Seder. Like, I want to think of it on my own, but like once you explain it to me, like, okay, sounds good. Like, I'll do it, Commemorate Exodus, matzah, sounds good. Like, it kind of makes sense after you tell it to me, and then it mitzvahs make no sense. That's official categorization in the Torah. Three different types of mitzvahs. Edut, chukim, mishpatim. Okay. But if you have to count, which mitzvahs make more sense? And what's the ratio? Make sense mitzvahs to not making sense mitzvahs. The not making sense mitzvahs is more. Think about it. Most mitzvahs don't make sense. Which means even if you get down to the logic of it, you'll never really explain it. Why does God want to circumcise a boy? Why? You could try explaining from today till tomorrow. It's nothing other than God's desire. God chose He wanted morality and right. God wanted us to circumcise. Why keep Shabbos? Why keep kosher? Why put a mezuzah? A mitzvah, Kabbalah teaches us, is a way that we in our physical world, using our physical bodies, and using the very material, the very substance of our physical world, can allow God's very essence to shine. When a Jew does a mitzvah, when a Jew studies Torah, hidden in the alphabet of the Torah study is God's absolute, purest, rawest essence. How could God's essence fit into a mezuzah? Because it's the essence. It's not bound by any rules. When you do a mitzvah, you're bringing the essence of God into this world. The only problem is that we don't get to sense it. Can you imagine if you really sensed when you study Torah that you are becoming totally intimate with the, an energy of God which is totally not even part of the system, the essence of God. You're now bringing it into your life. You're now bringing it into your family, into your world. Kabbalah says we don't get to experience it, which is good, because if we would experience it, you wouldn't survive the experience. But, there's going to be a turning point, a critical moment. What's it called? The critical mass, right? That's when Mashiach comes. And we'll actually experience God being at home in this physical world. The world will remain the physical world as we know it, and yet be a home for God through our own actions. Everything we've learned is for this. Dear friends, let me put this up over here. The power of mitzvahs is that it brings God at home into this physical world, which means, this is the irony, a mitzvah is the greatest spiritual experience possible. Study about great spiritual worlds, it's all good and fine. If it doesn't come back down here, you're missing the point. The whole system is that we could be down here and we could schlep God, allow God in by a mitzvah we can do today. It sounds too simple, but this is the idea, that God should be here. That's the whole point. We are connected with God's essence, and this is the only answer. What's the purpose? Why are we here? Why did God start creation? Why is the world full of so much darkness? What is my mission today? It sounds so simple because it's meant to be simple, right? Don't give people complex answers. Give people simple answers. Make it accessible. Make it approachable. Don't tell somebody maybe in 10 years you could start living a purposeful life. Tell them it could be done today. Tell a 3-year-old child you could do it. That's the idea. To have the deepest spiritual experience, Kabbalah shows us, is to bring God home. Bring God here. That's the whole thing. There should be a space that the inhabitants of that space don't have any natural relationship to God. They don't sense any relationship with God, and they could bring God there to home. And if there's one message I could share with you from Kabbalah, that will be it. That's where Kabbalah always comes back down. The end is there at the beginning. At the beginning, you find the end. Dear friends, it's 11:58. That means it's time to start wrapping up. Let us do a meditation nigun, and then we're going to wrap up. Dear friends, this nigun that I want to play with you is a very special song. This is a song that's considered to be such a holy song that it's not even sung. Most Hasidic songs could be sung recreationally, leisurely. This is a song that is reserved only for special occasions. It is the song in the Chabad tradition we sing under the chuppah when the bride and the groom make their way to the chuppah ceremony. It is only sung at very, very holy occasions. And I think on this holy day, on this special day, and as we finish concluding such a special course, this is a song that is authored by the Alter Rebbe. It's called the Song of the Four Stanzas. As simple as that. 4 stanzas. And hopefully you'll hear some of the intensity of it. But this is, we got one more slide here. Atzmut wants only us. There's all of reality. But the point is nothing other than you and me here today in the final days of 2023 in the mitzvah that we are going to do today. In that one little thing. All right, let us do the lesson nigun. Dear friends, take this in. This is a very special nigun. So feel free. The 4 stanzas, or the nigun of the Alter Rebbe. This is a very, very deep spiritual nigun. And by the way, 4 stanzas, 4 spiritual worlds. It's a song that captures the energy of the system in the form of a song. So here we go. You ready? There you go, Jake. Thank you.
Yama mama mai, yama mama mai, ay ay la doi doi doi. Yama mama 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 moi doi, ay ay la doi doi doi. Ay 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 ay. Mama, 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 you know, mama, yeah, 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 oh, you know, yeah.
How was that? You felt the power? All right, dear friends, what can I say? I think our time is up. So, dear friends, with that, the world of Kabbalah comes to an end after these amazing 6 weeks together. But dear friends, we got more good stuff coming up. Okay, so it still is not ready. Hopefully it's going to be ready today, and I'll send it the email as soon as it is. The next course, the website and the registration page will hopefully be live today. And as I mentioned in an earlier class, we'll have a special promotion. Register by the end of Hanukkah. Am I getting the lights there? Right behind Julie? There you go. Yeah, there you go. Okay, there. Okay. I don't like the darkness. And special promotion until the end of Hanukkah to carry on the inspiration from this course straight on to the next course. I want to wish you all a happy Hanukkah. And dear friends, this has been such a joy, such a special course. I want to encourage all of you to keep the inspiration going. With this, what I'm going to do. I'm going to share also an email to wrap up this course. In there is going to be two next steps you could do after this course. Number one is I'm going to give you a few options of text of Hasidic teachings, more full-size texts of the full thing. I'll give you a few that are not so big, but you could order the book and you could study it, maybe even find a partner to study it with. Maybe you could even start a small little class to do a more text base of something that connects a text of Hasidus that helps gives a deeper appreciation, a deeper understanding of these very special teachings. I'll give you a few further learning options. And number two, we have a weekly class on Mondays. We have a morning class and an evening class studying the Tanya, the most important text of the Hasidic teachings. It's very difficult. We're already over 50 classes in. We have a very special committed group. And the problem is, I know some of you started with it. It was hard to keep up with it. Here's the thing. We are almost at the chapter 26. Chapter 26 starts a brand new topic. So I want to send out to all of you the information. If you want to join the Tanya class in a few weeks' time, in 4 or 5 weeks, we'll be up to chapter 26. So right after New Year's in January, if you want to jump back on to start learning Tanya, every week Monday, the classes are also recorded and put up online on YouTube and on Spotify. You could find it, you can search Tanya. It's called Tanya, the Kabbalah of You, with Rabbi Levi Dubov. Find it on YouTube or on Spotify. And I hope that this course is only the beginning of more study, to get you on a great journey going forward. And with all that, may God bless you all. Thank you so much for joining. It was such a joy. And we'll see you all later.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
And have a happy Sunday. Great Sunday.